Hello Handi Quilters, I'm Rhonda Mills, a member of your Handi Quilter Quilt Your Desire Inspiration Squad. As you probably know, our theme this year and challenge from Handi Quilter is to quilt your desire. So in that spirit, I thought I'd share with you a few of the ways that I recently quilted this baby quilt. I'll share with you my inspiration for a few of the designs, as well as a tip or two as to how I got the job done. So let's get started. So in this first strip of fabric I have plaid, so very distinctive vertical and horizontal pattern. So to play off of that and to choose something with some movement and freedom, I just went with a nice medium stipple. And the reason I chose a medium stipple is because I know what's coming. I know the different things that I'm going to quilt on down the quilt, and I want this pattern to match up as far as its size with what's going on below it. So just be sure that you keep that in mind as you plan your quilting, that you want everything pretty evenly distributed over the quilt so that once you wash it and it dries, everything crinkles up just real nicely and nothing's too large or too small. This is one of my favorite fabrics in the quilt, and the little raindrops are just so adorable. I really didn't want to quilt something that was too busy. So I went with just a simple wavy line, which is really easy to do. The way I keep it wavy yet straight is I'll find the nearest straight line, for example this seam, and as I begin to quilt, I'll keep my line of vision about 4 inches out from where I am actually quilting. So I found that as I keep my eye more over here, my hand just naturally follows where it needs to be, and I'm able to wave but not move too far off course either down or up. For some time I've been looking for a perfect excuse to quilt clouds and stars, and by gosh, this quilt gave me one. The little umbrella fabric was just perfect for that design. So, I watched Handi Quilter's video on their YouTube channel as to how to quilt clouds and stars and add in a little doodle interest here, a little swirl. And then I practiced that on my grid paper, which is very important. Then I took it to the long arm and I quilted it on a practice piece, and by gosh, all that work paid off because I was able to come to this quilt and just quilt very freely, very organically, without having to think too hard about it. So I just love the adorable little stars, the way the clouds just kind of float across the quilt. It's probably my favorite design on this baby quilt. If you haven't tried adding words to a quilt, I really encourage you to look for an opportunity to do that. I think it's just a really nice addition, especially on a baby quilt. So my inspiration here was the fabric itself. It says, "You make me happy." And so that's what I have quilted onto that strip. And rather than try and make "You make me happy" fit just exactly right here, I went with what the fabric was doing, and the words run off the edge, of course. So over here on the left-hand side, I started with the end of the word "make," me, happy, added a few doodle hearts, and then the complete phrase, "You make me happy," more hearts, and then just picked up the phrase again. So it just has a nice organic feel to it, and I didn't have to worry about, oh my gosh, I've got to make those words fit exactly here. And yes, I could have marked it that way. I just try to mark my quilt as little as possible, and for this particular application, I think the only thing that I did was I took my ruler and I did draw in a few places a straight line right here. So at the bottom of the 1-inch mark and the bottom of the 2-inch mark, just kind of like a Big Chief tablet. Those of you who remember what those are, just kind of gave me something to shoot for so that I kept most of my lettering within that frame, and then my P's could drop down, my K could go up, my hearts could kind of split the difference between it all. But what I didn't do was just mark solidly this whole section. Again, I was trying not to be too rigid, just sort of trying to go with it, but also stay on track. For the doodle star section, I just quilted simply doodle hearts. And this was really fun and easy. Didn't have to think too hard about it. I didn't even mark for it. I just eyeballed it and sort of error drew it before I quilted it, and then just started in. So just very simply, I found that it was helpful to bounce in, bounce out, bounce in, bounce out. So big heart, little heart, bounce in, bounce out, bounce in, bounce out. Just a lot of fun, a lot of freedom, and is perfect for a baby quilt. Because I had simple rows of fabric on the front, I wanted to make something a little more interesting and different on the back of the quilt. And in doing so, I found that as I transitioned my thread color, this black fabric helped show some of the quilting very nicely, like my little pink cloud outline. Here in the raindrops, my black doodle stars show up nicely. And then back again in this black section, my hearts and my pink swirls, and then down here my clamshells show up. Just a nice way to add some interest to the quilt on the back. A little change in thread color and some strategic placement of some darker fabric to make it really pop. Last, I'd like to show you my organic clamshells. Now, I did not do these with my Handi Quilter clamshell ruler, because I intentionally wanted them to have more of a free-form design. The only thing that I would have done different in retrospect, and every quilt always has something you would do different, is I would have made these a little smaller so that I could have had another row. But it is what it is, and it's still okay. I did mark for these. I drew a straight line down the center, and then I put a little tick mark at each place that I knew I needed to head toward or move back to. So I used my friction pin, and all of that came out just fine when I pressed it. So I really like the organic look of a clamshell. It does take a little bit of practice, so I would advise you to do it on a practice piece before you bring it to a quilt. But they're really fun, and I think it just added a nice ending to the whole baby quilt. So if you haven't yet tried free motion or doodle quilting, I really encourage you to do so. It's great fun, and it just adds a unique charm and personality to a quilt, unlike any other style of quilting that we do. So be brave, grab that sketch pad, practice on your Handi Quilter, and I promise you that in no time you'll be ready to free motion quilt too.